Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the CX Goalkeeper podcast. Your host, Gregorio Uglioni, will have a smart discussion with expert, thought leader, and friends on customer experience, transformation, innovation, and leadership. I hope you will enjoy the next episode. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gregorio Uglioni, your host, the CX Goalkeeper. I had the great pleasure to interview Neal Topf and Paul Catherall. It was really an outstanding discussion, which I split into episodes. After the success of publishing the first one, now I'm going to release the second one. Stay tuned, it's really a great one. Enjoy! Thank you, Paul. I think what you're saying, it's really important, and on the other side, also for me, it's really great or really transparent. I was in one of your webinars 2 weeks ago, last week, and it was really great to be there to get some insights on podcasting. We can learn from each other, and this is really cool. We spoke a lot about business. Now, perhaps also based on what you're saying, kindness linking customer experience to business. Is there something that you learned that you are also applying in your private life? Let's start with Neal again.
Wow. So as a leader, oftentimes what is required of us is strength, communication. Empathy is a new thing, I believe, in leadership that has occupied more and more volume of importance. There's one thing that has always been, I admit, a continual learning process for me. We talk about continuous improvement. One area for me that I really started to hear about on the podcast was emotional intelligence, EI, Sandra Thompson. She was a guest on our podcast. You know her. Many of us, follow her. Emotional intelligence is one thing that is always important to apply, of course, in one's work life, but without a doubt in one's home life, right? I have a son. He's almost 9 years old. To be a good parent, I have to be very emotionally intelligent, but I'm not always all the time. I'm human. Sometimes I get upset. Sometimes I get frustrated. Sometimes I don't know what to do. Sometimes he's smarter than me. And I have to be very emotionally intelligent to try to figure out and navigate those things. So that's certainly one of them. I think that would be the one that stands out the most for me of what I apply in my personal life.
Thank you, Neal. And now making again a really difficult for Paul. You cannot repeat what Neal said.
No, but Neal, that's a wonderful answer. Kudos to you, mate. And you're a wonderful dad, right? You're just a great person. Anyway, I think for me, what I've learned is the mindfulness approach, and just to be a little bit more cognizant that not everybody is looking at the way that you look at things, right? And that's really helped me understand kind of what my wife is heavily involved in the BPO industry, and currently she's out in Taiwan. She's been there since January, and it's helped me understand how I can communicate better with her in terms of the challenges that she faces. And so, for example, she may come and she says, right, Paul, I've got this is happening at work, and she just wants to vent and she wants to let off steam, right? And normally I would go, right, let me try and fix it. But she's not looking for me to fix it. She's just looking for me to share ideas, etc., etc. So I think for me, I've learned more about the mindfulness and more about just being not so quick to anger if people don't see things the same way as you, right? That's also helped me in my golf game, to be honest with you. I now don't get so frustrated as I used to when I hit a bad shot. So yeah, and I hit plenty of bad shots, believe me. So there we go.
Thank you. The next time I will change my pitch behind me that you can play golf, not thinking about soccer. And now, as I don't want to be unpolite, I start with you, Paul, so that then Neal can copy your answer. You are always closing your podcast with three questions. And from your point of view, what was one of the most interesting CX myths that was posted in your podcast?
Whoa.
So there's so many. It's taken me a while to really get down to the one that really hit home with me. Yes, we spoke about Jess Noble, but the one that I really want to bring it back to was Rashad. So we had Rashad on Friday, and I'm not saying this simply because he's the most recent. What he said to me, and we'll share it in the podcast on Monday, was there's no such thing as one customer journey. And initially when he said it, both Neal and I went, nah, Rashid, you're talking rubbish there. And then he went on to explain it, and I went, oh my God, he's so true. And so Jess Noble, but Rashad really smashed it out of the park for me. But there's just so many to choose from. We've had so many people that have come on and smashed some wonderful myths. But yeah, Rashad, all the way for me. Brilliant, brilliant.
Thank you, Paul. And Neal, on your side, but this time you are not allowed to mention the two that Paul already mentioned. Please not mention again Jess Noble and Richard. Another one.
Yeah, this is a hard one because there's so many really brilliant ones that have come up. I'm going to, I don't know if this was specifically one, but this has been one that's appeared a couple times. We use the term, a very colloquial term, we need to suck less. We need to suck less. I'm actually going to believe that. I'm not going to bust that myth. I'm going to agree with it. Customer care, customer experience is not always successful, whatever successful means. It's very difficult to achieve optimal customer-centric experiences. I've said this for years. There's no call center, or you can substitute customer experience easy button. You don't press it and you receive it. It's not magic. It's not a button you get to press. In your chapter, Gregorio, you very clearly state, and many people use this statistic, that so many percentage of people would pay more for better customer experience. I would challenge that. Just because you're going to pay more doesn't mean you can offer, you meaning like our organization, doesn't mean you can offer it. If a customer is willing to pay more all of a sudden, it doesn't mean we're going to be able to actually deliver it, even if we have more money to do it. I think our objective is to figure out, first and foremost, how do we suck less? Now, if we go back to your model, how do we start to eliminate the irritants? How do we add value? Or the opposite, how do we destroy less value? This is in quotes. How do we suck less, of course. But I think looking at your model, how can we do those things? How do we eliminate irritants, and how do we start to add more value? Knowing that eliminating the irritants altogether and adding 100% value, whatever that means, is very, very difficult. Maybe it's a unicorn. Maybe it's a unicorn. Very few of our organizations have the ability to truly do that. We're not all Amazon. We're not all Zappos. And even if we want to be, it's very hard to achieve it. I hope that made sense.
Extremely, and I fully agree with you. Fully transparent. It's not my model. It's a bill price model, and the best service is no service. This is also the source of all of this model, the value irritant matrix. But I completely agree with you. I am really investing or spending time with you, and I know today is Labor Day, and you are investing, let's say, times in this podcast during one of your Fridays. I don't want to use too much time, but I still have 2-3 questions that I would love to ask, and I hope that we can quickly discuss them. Please stop me if you want to stop. I continue for the next few hours, and then in 3-4 hours I will organize pizza for all of you. Now, joke by side. On my podcast, one of the most mentioned books is Ian Golding's book, Customer What, and you are also asking to your guest, the CX hero. Which heroes, which CX professionals are the most mentioned or that they come often? Neal, Paul, up to you.
The ones that are most mentioned, let's see. So Paul and I have talked about this before. Let's see if we can come up with the list. Inevitably, we hear Shep Hyken's name.
Yeah.
We often hear Nate Brown. Occasionally, we hear Jeremy Watkin, who's a wonderful CX thought leader and practitioner in the US. We have heard the name Claire Muscat. Her name has resonated. Claire, if you're listening, we want to have you on our podcast. We want to have you on the podcast, but we can't get you to respond. Please respond to us. We want to have you have the chance to interview you. Who else, Paul?
Sorry, Neal. Our assistant left, and therefore they have some issues with emails. But this is
okay.
We're dying to spend time with her and get to know her and understand her organization, because she's has a tremendous organization she's building, and we want to know more. We want to know more about what they do, how the organization works. Paul, who else am I forgetting of the really common names?
I think they're the main ones that we hear, particularly Shep and Nate. They tend to come up quite a lot. But what I like, Gregorio, is the ones that aren't necessarily in the CX space. So we've had, for example, Auntie Sandra, as I call her. She came on and she gave a wonderful story about, I believe his name was Stephen. He's a local mechanic. Well, actually, he's not local. That's the story, right? I think he's about a 30-mile drive away from where Sandra lives. But because he gives such good customer experience, she keeps going back to him, right? So there's the story of CX in a nutshell. So I like those that are a little bit out of left field. I know when Neal and I first started the podcast, and I asked Neal who was one of his CX heroes, he'd had a great experience at school, at Jacob's school for that week, and he called out the teachers. So those are the ones that I really like and I really enjoy, because it gives you an insight into the type of person that they are. And listen, anybody can go on to LinkedIn 5 minutes before they come up the podcast and go, right, CX hero, CX leaders, thought leaders, who are the top 5 or 6, and just reel out those names. And we very rarely get that. We get people who have thought about the heroes, what it's meant to them, and why they're calling out those people. So yeah, I would just like to take this opportunity and to thank all our guests who come on and who give up their time so freely, and who actually make the podcast what it is. Neal and I could talk for hours, but people wouldn't listen to Neal and I. People want to listen to our guests and want to hear, stories such as yourself, such as, Rashad, such as Jess, such as Nate, all these people that have come on and have really brought the podcast life. And if I can as well, I would like to give a fairly large shout out to Leslie O. Leslie O's been a fan of the podcast more or less since episode 1, and she's always one of the, such as yourself, Gregory. She's one of the first to like when we post, always gives us feedback. So Leslie, please, if you're listening, thank you so much for your support. You really are an angel.
Thank you very much. I think it's really an outstanding discussion, but Paul, you are a podcast expert, and therefore I think you should organize a solo episode together with Neal. I think quite a lot of people would listen to you and to your discussions.
We did that when on the start, but I think we should go back and circle back, and maybe that's how we'll finish this year. Is I'll interview Neal, and Neal can give us kind of his thoughts on how this year's gone, because this year for us from a podcasting perspective has been a bit of a learning curve, right? We've pivoted, we've focused a lot more on the CX3 book, and we've got some really exciting plans for next year. We've got a brand new, I guess you'd call like a splinter off. We've got a wonderful arm, a new arm starting of the podcast. We're very excited to launch over the next week or so. So yeah, there's some good stuff happening. And that guy there, even though he says I'm the smart one, I'm so not the smart one. Neal's the one who comes up with all these wonderful ideas, and it's just a pleasure to work with him. And yeah, there we go. I don't want to make his head any bigger. So there you go.
Exactly, it doesn't fit in the screen already. No, as you know, Gregorio, coming up and creating a podcast, I mean, and maybe you're making a lot of money on this podcast. I don't know. I mean, if you are, I want to know the secrets. But, you know, we do this because we love what we're doing. We like to create. We like to make good content and share the content. But these are challenging, right? Like, this takes a lot of time to invest and plan and schedule and all these things. It takes work. And we have to be fresh. One thing Paul and I have found with the podcast is there's so many CX podcasts now, right? How do we all differentiate ourselves from each other? Many of us are interviewing the same people, which nothing wrong with it. But at some point, I don't know if that's sustainable, right? We have to, if you look at it, at some point we're competing for listeners and downloads and likes, and we have to make sure we continue to be relevant. We're trying to do that, and your feedback is really special. Thank you for sharing that.
Neal, I fully agree with you and fully transparent. That's my passion. That's my hobby. I'm getting 0 Swiss francs. That it's equivalent to $0 and equivalent to €0. But I am getting a lot of good contacts, great discussion. And I am learning a lot, and therefore I'm doing that. My wife is fully supportive. She's always asking, when are you starting monetizing that? But I don't know how to monetize that. But this is another discussion. Coming to an end, Neal, could you please share your contact details if somebody would contact you?
Sure. I mean, here, well, I'm not going to put it up on the phone, but I'm on LinkedIn. I think my name is, it just as my name is spelled, Nealtopf. Same thing on Twitter. I think I'm on Instagram, but I don't post anything on that. I don't know what to post on there. And I think I'm on TikTok. I have no idea what I'm doing in TikTok. I'm not on Snapchat. And if I am, if someone sees me there, tell me to stop and get off. I shouldn't be on that place. LinkedIn is the best place to find me, especially around CX content. That's the place to be.
Thank you, Neal. And Paul, what's the best place to find you?
Exactly like Neal, LinkedIn and Twitter. So LinkedIn is Paul Catherall, or you can look at my page, the podcast coach page. You can also look for the Fireside Chats about the Fires LinkedIn page. So please, that's where you can find our content. And on Twitter, I'm at PaulCat72. 72 isn't my age. 72 is the year that I was born. So although I'm not that far off 72 right now. So yeah, that's how people can find me.
72 is your golf score.
Yeah, I wish it was my gold score, mate. But I'm on Instagram, PaulCat72 on Instagram, Podcast Coach on Instagram, Facebook page for Podcast Coach, and for Fireside Chats. But predominantly, Neal and I live in the LinkedIn world, and simply because we're CX focused, right? And that's where all the content is. So yeah, that's where you can find us. And please reach out, and if you've got any questions for the podcast, or if you have any topics that you'd like us to discover and research, then please let us know, and we're happy to do those type of things.
Thank you very much. And I'm coming to the last question that I will ask twice, and please don't copy from each other again. That's the last question. Let's start with Paul. Paul, golden nugget is something that we discussed or something new that you would leave and share with the audience?
Yeah, so this goes back to probably one of my favorite CX quotes, and it's not just about CX, it's more encompassing than that. And I forget which guest said it, but the quote is along the lines of, people forget what you say, but people never forget how you made them feel. And for me, I try to live where I possibly can by that motto, because it means the world to me that I was able to make somebody feel happy or improve their day just by being nice, right? So yeah, that's mine.
Thank you, Paul. We listened to Paul Golden Nugget. I'm not commenting that because it was Paul Golden Nugget. And now we hand over to Neal.
Wow, it's hard to follow up that one. That was profound. By the way, that's I think similar to what our guest and we're all friends with him, Gustavo Imhoff, had said. It's the most important thing is the memory that the customer has, the memory that someone has, not necessarily what happened. It's what the customer remembers, how it happened. But I agree. Mine is completely different. Mine is not as nice or as warm and touchy-feely. It's more around the direction of the CX business. Automate or don't exist anymore. That's heavy. We have to, as a business, figure out and understand the role of automation. Not if you're going to automate, you have to. The question is, how do we do it? How do we integrate it? That's my great business challenge, specifically trying to figure out and create those contexts and those environments, because it's one of the easy ways to eliminate the irritants, going back to the model in your chapter. It's a way to add value or to destroy less value. We have major challenges in our industry, and I think this has to be one of the solutions that we all have to embrace.
Thank you very much, Neal, also for your golden nugget. Neal's golden nugget was really outstanding to have you both at the same time on my podcast. Thank you very much, Neal. Thank you very much, Paul. It was really great.
Gregorio, thank you. You are a wonderful host. You are a thought leader. You are a very smart contributor to our community, and we're lucky to have you. And it was an honor to share some time together with you on this podcast and in future collaborations that I hope that we'll have together.
Gregorio, you may have some questionable football alliances and allegiances, but in terms of your knowledge in the CX world, mate, there's nothing questionable about the quality that you bring and your content that you put out. So, yeah, thank you so much for this. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And also to the audience, ladies and gentlemen, it was really an outstanding discussion. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed it, because it was really brilliant, great, and outstanding, as the same as the podcast of Neal and Paul, Fireside Chat Without Fires. Thank you very much. Grazie mille. Arrivederci. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the word of mouth. Subscribe it, share it. Until the next episode, please don't forget, we are not in a B2B or B2C business, we are in a human-to-human environment. Thank you!